Have you ever shown up to the gym, looked at your training program, and said, there is no way I can get this done today? Don't worry, we've all been there before. Today, I want to share a process that can help you to keep from skipping those sessions and getting the most out of your training when you're not at your best. If you've trained for a long time, you're going to know what I'm talking about. If not, just keep training and you'll get there. But at one point, there's going to come a time when what's written in your training program and what your body is capable of doing on that day are mismatched. Now, we hope that this doesn't happen very often. Ideally, it doesn't happen at all. That would be a pretty optimal training program. But training is pretty variable, especially depending on what you're training for. Humans are very variable, and so the likelihood of this happening is almost 100%. That's okay because there's a general solution for this that we refer to as auto-regulation of training. What that essentially means is that the auto means self and regulate means to regulate your training. If you work with a coach for years and years and years, you can probably get to a point where that coach knows your body pretty well and they're able to spot things that may be detrimental to your training and then regulate it, on the fly session per session. But that will take a lot of intimate time together. Most likely, especially if you get to a high enough level in any athletic endeavor, you're going to have to learn how to regulate your own training. You are going to know your body the best. You're the one who experiences all the pains and happiness and sorrow that come along with training. And so it's just a skill that every athlete needs to develop. I learned how to regulate my training the hard way by making mistakes, getting injured, getting hurt and sore and too tired, and then having to back off, and then learning how to listen when my body's trying to tell me those things and try to change things ahead of time instead of getting to those, broken states. However, working with a coach or other professionals, you might be able to speed up that process and learn what to look for and then what changes to make based on, that feedback your body is giving you. Either way, though, I've come up with a framework now so that every time it's a training day and I'm thinking about going into the gym, or I actually get into the gym and I notice that there's a mismatch between how I feel today or what I think I'll be able to produce in terms of the exercise and what I should be able to do or what's planned on paper. Whenever there's that mismatch, then I have a framework now that I basically go through in order to determine what aspects of the training that I'm going to change. So in this auto-regulation framework I've come up with, there are basically 5 places or things that I look at to try to modify. What I would like to do is modify ones that are earlier on this list than later. That would be ideal. And so that's how I look at it. So let's go through them. Number 1 is workload. So for the main exercise, secondary exercises, maybe if you're strongman, there's multiple main exercises. I take a look at the workload there because that's going to be the major taxing piece of any training session. And I see, is that workload accomplishable today? If not, then I'm going to think about the aspects of that workload and maybe I have to change them. First will be intensity. So say I have 5 sets of 5 barbell squat at 80% intensity, and I just know that day that's not going to happen. Okay, I would ask myself, what if I scaled that back to 70%? Could I still get 70% done today? No, maybe I couldn't. Okay, maybe 50%. But eventually I get to a low enough percent that maybe that stimulus isn't enough. So maybe the dropping the intensity really low isn't going to help me achieve my results. Okay. So then I look to the volume. 80% would be, the intensity that I would like for that day of my 1 rep max. But maybe I can't do 5 sets of 5. Could I do 4 sets of 5? Could I do 3 sets of 5? Maybe I can do 5 sets, but maybe I can only do 5 sets of 1 that day at 80%. So that workload is going to be the first place that I look to because ideally you've made a plan where you've picked the exercises you need to do to get to some goal. And you want to keep your body getting the stimulus as much as possible. That will help you achieve that goal. So playing with the workload, ideally, if you can keep the intensity, that's great. Maybe drop the volume. I found that that helps most of the time. Sometimes you have to drop both, but that's the first place to look is the workload. Okay, the second one is on the implement. Maybe the session before, with the example I just used, barbell back squats. Maybe the session before I beat up my elbows and I just am really hurting getting under a barbell. Now my legs might be strong enough to keep doing that workload that was determined for the session, but maybe my elbows specifically can't tolerate that. So I'll look at implements. What could I do where I can still squat, but I would be able to alleviate that strain on my elbows from being under the bar? So maybe I might try, consider something like saying 5 sets of five at 80%, but I would use a cambered bar so that I could put my arms down to the sides. Maybe if that was still too painful, I could use a safety squat bar or spider bar or something similar, and I could have my hands out in front in the most comfortable position. So that's the second thing to check is the implement. So number three is exercise. Now, probably if you have to change exercises, something's starting to go really wrong here. So either you had an injury or you're like accumulating a lot of fatigue and pain and tightness that's keeping you from doing an exercise you need to do to achieve your goals. That's a really bad sign, but it does happen. So in that case, you might consider switching the exercise. So let's say that in our example here, my legs were insanely fatigued. And I knew that the workload I couldn't do, the barbell itself or implement, the strain on top of my back just wasn't tolerable. Okay, so maybe I have to actually change the exercise. Maybe I can't do something with spinal loading. Maybe I would try like a belt squat, for example. Maybe that would be enough of a change to still get the stimulus I want in my lower body, but take some of the compression off my spine, or maybe my beat up elbows, like I mentioned in the previous one. So that would be the next thing to consider. Like, do you have to change the exercise? Maybe you have to change the exercise to a single leg squat, maybe like a single leg box squat, goblet squat, or something where you're just holding a lighter weight. Now, you're not going to get the stimulus you had planned, but at least you can still get on with the training session. So, because the whole goal here is to get as much out of the training session as you can, as opposed to skipping the training session. That should be almost a last resort. Now, number four is extra recovery time. So, if the workload isn't there, I can't find an implement to work around things, and then the movement pattern I know is just not there today, I'm going to end up injured potentially if I push through it and do that. That means I'm in a pretty bad state physiologically. Maybe I just need more recovery time. So I would do something like give myself an extra day of recovery. So if I need to do that squat on a Tuesday, maybe that Tuesday I went in, things felt horrible. Okay, so I move that to the Wednesday. And then I come in the next day, I warm up, I see how things feel. A lot of times, just an extra day or two can make a huge difference. And that way, you're not skipping the session. You know that session needs to get done. It's still getting done in a relatively close enough time to the previous stimulus to still be valuable. And so that would be the next, option in the list here. Extra days of recovery, or maybe even extra recovery modalities. Maybe have an extra ice bath, maybe have an extra massage that day, something like that. The last piece on the framework, number five, is to actually consider changing the program. I think that this is the last resort. This essentially would mean, you know, canceling your plans. So you made a plan, you have a goal, you made this plan to get there, and now you're thinking something has gone wrong. You've put yourself in such a deficit, or increase your injury potential so high that maybe the program isn't actually right. Or maybe you actually injured yourself in a previous session and it's affecting sessions and you're just not able to perform where you want to perform. Injuries would be one avenue or one incidence where changing the program might be worth it. So that might be restructuring how many days of work you do, what exercises are done each day, and the workloads and implements associated with that. If you're Maybe you should focus on recovering from your injury first so that you can get to a healthy state and get back to these loads, intensities that you want to perform in. So there you have it. That's the framework I use every time I have a training session or I'm going into the gym and I see there's this big mismatch between what's on paper and I'm supposed to do and how I feel and what I think I can do. So give it a try. Hopefully you'll be able to salvage some of those training sessions and just make it that many more steps closer to your training goals. Now there's a couple of caveats here I want to just mention. First is if you're a beginner or intermediate lifter, especially if you're looking to compete in some sport, try what was planned first. So usually advanced athletes, they're going to know their body so well, whether they have a coach or not, that they'll have a good intuition about how much they should modify. And they've learned to work so hard that they'll understand when it's appropriate to push through and when it's not. If you're newer to lifting or to sports, I would suggest trying what was planned first. If what might happen is you might surprise yourself and you might actually get the workout done. It might actually feel good when you felt bad. And what would happen there is just that you've just never pushed yourself hard enough to experience that. You just had a doubt. Your body might have been sore, and it might have had you doubting what what your potential is. But you'd be surprised sometimes what you can do. And I think when you're newer into lifting or into sports, try pushing yourself to your limits a bunch of times. That will give, and eventually you'll push over your limit, and then you'll be able to understand where it is. And that's literally the process of learning how to regulate your own training. Now, the next point I want to make here is if you are an athlete and you have a coach, talk to them. So you hired them to help you, with your training. So trust in them. They're going to be, a good coach is going to be open to this. They know you're not just a robot who can just execute all these exercises without fail forever and ever. And so they are learning your body as much as you are learning your own body and what it can handle and what it can do. So be open with them. Let them know when something was planned and you weren't able to get it done, that you made the choice to change some of it so that you could still get some stimulus out of it, as opposed to just showing up at your next check-in with your coach and just saying like, oh yeah, I skipped those 3 training sessions because, XYZ didn't feel right. So talk to them. They'll be able to help you with this process. All right, hopefully you understood that kind of theoretical framework I laid out for auto-regulation of your training. I wanted to give you a practical example that I went through just yesterday while I was training. So on paper, I had planned out to do yoke walks, but really I'm in a small garage, it's cold outside, so the yoke pick and holds 20 seconds with 535 pounds, and I wanted to do 3 sets. That was my first main exercise. The second one was sandbag loads over the bar of the yoke. And I wanted to do 6 sets of 2 sets at 150 pounds, 2 at 200 pounds, and 2 sets at 250 pounds. So I have a contest coming up. These 2 events actually are to be done as a single medley, as one event in the contest. So that's why these were the main efforts for this training session. However, when I walked in the gym yesterday, I felt really horrible. A few factors I had to consider when I was trying to see what's the mismatch between what's on paper and how I feel today. So the first thing was that my biceps, even today, and triceps on this left side feel like garbage. So even just moving them around was pretty painful. I tried putting on elbow sleeves. It didn't really help. I tried warming them up. It didn't really help. So I knew if I had to pick up sandbags, it was going to be probably disastrous. I probably could push through it, maybe, but I also might hurt myself in the process. So I think I've just accumulated so much fatigue in this area of my body over this training cycle that I knew these sandbag loads were going to be very painful and probably counterproductive. So that was the first thing. Second thing is a few days ago, I did a big overhead press and I got a personal record there, but that fried my lower back and my lats. So when I was warming up, just bending over at the hips, like hinging at the hips with my body weight was painful. And like my muscles were spasming. They're very tight and tired and fatigued. So I knew that this is going to be horrible for sandbag loads because you have to bend over in a deep hinge position, almost like a stiff leg deadlift. Pick up this big sandbag between your legs and then hinge all the way up and extend up and over a bar. I knew that I was going to be in a lot of pain there. And then yoke walks, those fry your entire body. So I knew that my lower back and lats are going to be absolutely in pain, if not potentially strained or injured at the end of this. And I think a lot of this is because of this third factor here that the night before that training session, I had a horrible sleep. We have a newborn baby. And I did not sleep very much because she did not sleep very much. To the point where I fell asleep on the couch talking to my other daughter. So all of these were put in my mind, and I thought, I am not going to get this work done. And if I do, there might be a high consequence to pay for it. And this contest I have isn't for a few months. So why would I pay such a consequence now? If this was like 3 weeks until the contest, maybe pushing through some of this would actually be necessary or worth it. But this far out, there's no real reason for me to push through this. Hopefully, understand what was planned now and what is the mismatch, where I was at on the day. So, if we went through the framework here, so first I look at workload. I know the workload is too much given those indicators in my body to handle. Okay, so I went to implements. Is there an implement I can change in order to get some work done that's still meaningful? Yes, there was. And so I also then considered exercise because I said, like, sandbag loads, especially, I didn't think they were really feasible for that day, even at a lightweight. So I thought, okay, is there an implement exercise, changes I can make? Yes, there is. So what I chose to do was I did a barbell squat against bands for sets of doubles. And let me explain why I chose that. So the squat, if we compare the squat to the yoke is a bar across your back that you pick up and stand with. Eventually, you hopefully walk with it or run with it. So the squat mimics that. I'm able to get a load on my back that's similar to the yoke. Okay, so that's why I picked the squat for the yoke. So on the squat, I can also get up to, as I'm going to show you here, similar weight as what I wanted to do for the yoke pick and hold. So that was another plus for the squat. I can get the same kind of intensity that I was looking for. And then the squat is a movement that is done as part of the sandbag load. So I knew I couldn't do the pick portion of the sandbag where you pick it off the ground into your lap because my arms were too fried. But I thought if I squatted, I'm still practicing that kind of extension portion, right? So from the lap up to the chest, that kind of squat portion of the movement. So that's why I chose it because it mimics that portion of the sandbag load. Why did I pick bands? I picked bands because my hips were really sore, as I mentioned. And so as you get to the bottom of the squat, you deload some of that intensity, right? So if I wanted 530 pounds at the top, maybe I get like 100 pounds less in the bottom. And so that's just going to help me take a little bit of load off of my hips while I'm in that deeper position. So that's why I picked that. And why I picked doubles was because I knew doing the full squat movement, the unrack, the 2 squats, and the re-rack would take me about 20 seconds. And that was the same amount of time that I wanted to do yoke pick and holds for, was 20 seconds. Now on this though, I just worked up to a single set of a heavy squat double. So basically one set of 20 seconds. And so there's another difference. I had planned 3 sets of 20 seconds, but I just knew my body wasn't going to be able to take that. So hopefully that gives you an idea now of what was planned, where I was, and then what compromise I came to in the middle. And because of that, I actually had a really good training session. And today I don't feel beat up. I actually felt beat up worse yesterday. So that means that my ability to regulate my training there, listen, and make intelligent choices really helped me. I got some stimulus that was at least partially fulfilled those 2 exercises I wanted to do, but also didn't beat my body to a place where I'm like messed up for next training session. So I hope that example helps to illuminate this auto-regulation framework that I laid out here. If you want to lift weights or train for sports or performance sports for a long time, you're going to have to learn this skill. For most people, they're not going to have the ability to get a coach that knows their body so well that they can regulate the training session by session or exercise by exercise. I mean, that would almost need your coach to be in the room with you or, on speed dial, ready to go. So you're going to have to learn this yourself, at least to some degree. But if you're new to this, please try to do the planned workouts. It might actually be the case that you just don't know what your limits are and you just need to keep pushing yourself and sometimes even a little beyond, hopefully without getting injured, so that you know where the line is and then you're able to regulate better next time. So maybe you need help. Maybe you want to learn a bit more about how to regulate your training. No problem. You can book a consultation with me through my website, strengthintelligence.ca, and I'll be happy to help you answer any of those questions you have about it. But I hope that this framework I laid out gives you a basis that now you can have a bit more confidence when you go into the gym. You can go through this checklist, these 5 points that I talked about, and see if there's things you can change that can allow you to get some training stimulus instead of just skipping that session. And with that, I wish you the best of luck with your training. Thanks for watching. Take care.